Hello and welcome again. Today's episode might be a little bit ragged. I'm off the plane from Paris. I've been talking with people in Europe, and that could affect today's show. You know what jet lag is like. We're waiting, by the way, still waiting, as you may have been informed last time, we're still waiting for Henry Kissinger to show up. Henry is, we've prepared for Henry, and we're looking forward to hearing from him. We do have some emails and some notes that he was kind enough to send. And part of the reason for that is he wrote an article in a magazine recently, or somebody wrote it for him and took his name. We really don't know. He's so famous he may not have to sit down and actually write articles. Anyway, there's an article allegedly by Henry Kissinger in this month's Atlantic, not about foreign affairs or anything like that, but about the internet and so on. And the question is, on Raising Questions this time, what does that have to do with the king of any country with a monarchy? Currently, of course, we're talking about, on the male side, we're talking about a couple of princes, one of whom just had a very expensive and rather gaudy wedding in London, and we're talking about his mother as well. What does Henry Kissinger have to do with monarchy? And especially, what does that have to do with Casey Stengel, the manager of the Yankees in the 50s and 60s? And what does that have to do with anything else? Why talk about the monarchy? The point is really that recently the monarchy got a lot of attention from not only from citizens of Britain, but also zillions of people over here were watching this magical royal wedding. And that seems to me to be something of a waste of time. We don't need monarchies, we don't need kings, queens, princes, and princesses, especially the ones who soak up an awful lot of public funds. In the case of the monarchy in England, many millions of dollars, if not, some authorities say, billions of dollars reside in that one family. It's ridiculous. But we'll come back to that. Now, what about Henry Kissinger, and what about one of the most exciting things that have happened in America recently? This is America, so in America, this is exciting. Football players refusing to respect the American flag and the national anthem. For some reason or other, here in America, that's regarded as something critically important. It even occupies people at the White House. Apparently, the winner of last year's Super Bowl, well, last season's Super Bowl, decided not to come to the White House because President Trump was involved in this dispute about the flag and the national anthem and so forth. Well, let's get to it. What is that really all about? It actually is stupid and silly and irrelevant on the surface, but underneath it illustrates something that we've talked about before in this program, and that Henry Kissinger will get to as soon as he shows up, or I will cover for him. He says, Henry Kissinger says, that one of the reasons why our country might be in trouble, and I believe him, is that subgroups have now taken the place of the nation as a whole. He doesn't say it exactly that way, I'm interpreting for him. Subgroups and the multiplicity of subgroupings have taken over in America, and we don't have much of a nation anymore. And that is illustrated by the fact that some professional football players refuse to go along with everybody else in a stadium and do what everybody else does in a stadium when the national anthem is played. In the first place, that national anthem is very, very important to a lot of people, and so is the flag. It symbolizes a lot of things, and symbols are very, very important. They're lodged in the brain and in the mind. They're not something out there. You can't go out and buy a symbol unless you buy something concrete that represents the symbol. That gets super philosophical. The point is that that waving flag really, really causes a lot of people to feel very, very emotional. And in the face of a football player refusing to go along with the rest of the crowd in the stadium, that can cause a lot of hard feelings. And again, getting to Henry Kissinger and to other people, we have to ask, so what? As Kissinger points out, we have more and more and more subgroups in America, and the notion of nation is suffering as a result of that. In other words, we have professional football players, some of different ethnic backgrounds from the majority of people in America. And what does that matter? Does it matter at all that a person from a so-called subgroup from a section of the country refuses to honor the national anthem in the way that most people do? Yes, it matters a lot. And the trouble is you don't hear why it matters. Again, the flag and the song are symbols, and symbols are also lodged in the brain, not the flag, not the song. But the symbols are lodged in the brains of people. That has a lot to do with their thinking and with their feeling. And if you take one of those symbols and jerk it out or refuse to honor it, you, logically enough, you cause a lot of hard feelings in the stadium and in the rest of the country that's watching the games, at least. All of this started, I believe it was right after or during World War I. That's when the national anthem started appearing at baseball games. I'm pretty sure it was World War I. If not, then it was World War II. And as a result, baseball and other sports later on got involved with patriotism. Now that's a sad thing. Baseball is a so-called national pastime, but why should it be wrapped up in the flag? I think a lot of players seem to be saying that, but they're saying it in a somewhat goofy way, not a very well-reasoned way, and they're making a lot of people mad. All right, so where are we? A lot of people are mad because some people don't respect, in the opinion of the majority, the flag and the national anthem. So what? Well, again, back to what we said already with Henry. The notion of nation is suffering. Do we have a coherent national existence? Or are we just 320 million people grouped in various subgroups contending with each other all the time? You hear about this all the time. You know, President Trump is against the Congress. Congress can't get it together. The Republicans and the Democrats do not combine to produce proper legislation, and the Supreme Court's against everybody. You hear all that all the time, that we have log jams and there's no progress and this, that, and the other thing. Well, don't blame Washington. It's not Washington's fault, not exclusively anyway. The people in Washington are just representing zillions of subgroups, too many subgroups. There are real people out there who disagree, sometimes even, I want to use the word violently, but cautiously. They disagree even violently or very, very emotionally with each other, such as the people who salute and other people who don't salute the flag. So what does this mean? It means that we have a divided government, and it means that the government seems to be doing very little in the way of any progressive politics. And again, so what? What can we do about that? It seems one thing we can do is go back to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has made a lot of decisions. This is just one book about all the Supreme Court decisions that we've had. And the court in America has made some wonderful decisions about the problem that I'm talking about, not saluting the flag and so forth. There have actually been decisions asking in the Supreme Court, can this little girl, there was a little girl from West Virginia, the great state of West Virginia, who refused to go along with the Pledge of Allegiance and that kind of thing in class, and her parents also refused to go along with it. And this went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And by the way, there was a war on, World War II. And this is especially American, and it's really brilliant. The Supreme Court said that little girl cannot be forced to say something that she is forbidden to say by her religion. Well, I mean, that's pretty magnificent, especially in a time of war. Now, the Supreme Court, thank goodness, has been a force for that for decades and decades, a force for free speech. Basically, the court has said, unless you're causing an imminent danger by talking, then you can talk. You can say whatever you want. And imminent danger would be something like addressing a crowd of people who are armed and telling them, let's go 3 blocks down there and shoot anybody we see. That's not protected free speech. You can't do that, even in America. But you can do a lot of things here that fray the image of the notion of a nation, to come back to that point. In other words, if people are saying, I refuse to salute the flag, I'm not singing that stupid national anthem, I'm even going to kneel on the ground while everybody is standing up. That phrase at the idea that we're all together in something, and it ought to be taken seriously. But the Supreme Court says quite intelligently, I'll bet if the Supreme Court talks about this, they're going to say, let the football players kneel. That's American. They can't be forced to salute something or sing something that they don't quite believe in. Maybe they believe in it ultimately, maybe they believe the rocket's red glare really is a great thing and all that, but maybe they also think, you know what, we're not living up to the ideals in that song. So the Supreme Court will almost undoubtedly say, let them check out. And it would be wrong for the president to step in and say, get rid of those guys, although I think the current president may not realize that. I'm not entirely sure. Well, how can we conclude all of this? Where does it lead? It leads again to the notion of nation. Are we together in this in the United States, or are we fragmenting? And we are fragmenting like crazy, again, into subgroups, along ethnic lines, along national origin lines, along all sorts of lines, and we're in a very dangerous, precarious situation because of that. Unless we are united, it's going to be very hard to pass decent legislation, for instance. And that's a great question, maybe for us down the road. It's really hard to say. And it would be great if we could have some sort, to come to the unpredictable conclusion, it would be great if we could have some sort of monarchy. As I've said already, I side with the people who say monarchy is ludicrous. Again, especially in England, all that money handed to these people every year so they can party. That's about all they do. And they come out on the balcony and wave to crowds and so forth, but they don't talk to anybody very much, and they have very, very little to say. The whole thing is a fairy tale. Well, fairy tales are symbols. Fairy tales have symbols. And when people watch some meaningless prince and his meaningless movie star bride going down the road in an open carriage that costs a lot of money in Britain, something is stirred in the soul. There's no question about that. It's the same thing that stirred in you and me when I was 2 years old and when you were 2 years old, and Mommy and Daddy read stories about the king did this and the queen did that and so forth. Something in the human brain attaches itself to these stories and to these fantasies. So in Britain, there are all these princesses and kings and queens running around, and they are officially on top of, they're above the government. There's the people, the government, and people on top of the government. It's all those people at Buckingham Palace. Why is this a good thing? Because that way the people don't think that the government is the highest thing in the land. Boy, think about that. In America, the government is the highest thing in the land. And when you get incompetent people like we have now running the government, well, maybe we need, at least for a week or so, maybe we need Prince Harry and so forth and Queen Elizabeth to come over here and appear on the balcony of the White House, or we'll give them their own castle. Surely Hollywood could come up with something like that. All right, thank you for thinking about these things, and we'll see you again.